Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order this meeting of the 13th of July, 2023 City Nashua Planning Board. Could we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mayor Donchis, Mike Peterson, Scott Leclaire,
Here.
Adam Varley,
Here.
Maggie Harper, here, Patricia Kleen, here, Dan Hudson,
Here.
Bob Bollinger,
Here.
Larry Hirsch, Derek Tebow.
Okay, thanks. So we have a quorum. We're going to keep moving with the agenda. Next up, we have for the board approval of minutes. We have minutes in our packet from the June 15th, 2023 Planning Board meeting. Has anybody had a chance to take a look at those and want to make a motion as to whether they're ready for us to accept as written or need amendments? Alderman Clee?
I was not here at the meeting, but I did watch it and then I did read it, so I feel comfortable with recommending approval of the minutes.
Okay, so we have that motion to approve by Alderman Clee as written. We have a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bollinger. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none, and no abstentions. Okay, so that passes. Communications?
Communications, there was only one letter that was received after your mailer went out, and I believe that was for the first case. Okay. There was only one letter that came in after the mailer was sent out, and that was for the Kinsley Street project, and that was engineering comments.
Okay, thanks a lot. Any reports for committees, liaisons?
None to report.
All right. All right, so moving on with the agenda. I'm going to be taking things a little bit out of order. The first thing I'm going to start with is other business number 2. This is a referral from the Board of Aldermen on a proposed petition for waiver of school impact fees. This is for 2-21 Sutton Way. We have somebody here to present on that referral.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Brad Westgate. I'm a lawyer with Weiner & Bennett, 402 Amherst Street here in Nashua, and I represent the petitioner, Crimson Properties, LLC. Thank you for letting us move up in the agenda. We appreciate it. I'll be brief. The petition is to request a waiver of the school impact fee submitted to the Board of Aldermen, referred to you. It'll go back to the Board of Aldermen, of course, after this referral in one of the Board of Aldermen's committees. This property is the former Christian Science building, which Crimson Properties raised and has developed a community known as Covington Place, a condominium. It's a housing for older persons community, 62 and older requirements. There's 12 units. As the board is well aware, the school impact fee applies to all residential development, but there are certain cases in which waivers from it can be obtained. By the way, Mr. Chair, Randy Tamel of Crimson Properties is here with me. At this point, he's closed on one of the units, has another closing, a couple closings pending, therefore under purchase and sale, and other marketing activity is ongoing. Each of these units has to be under or can't exceed 1,000 square feet of habitable space. So by their nature, they don't lend themselves to school-age children as a general practical matter. But more importantly, because they're 62 and older communities, the requirements for 62 and older communities, both under state and federal law, is that all residents must be 62 and older. So it's not even really possible to have school-age children in a 62 and older community. In 55 and older communities, you've seen them before, that's where the 80% rule applies. 20% of those units could be less than 55 and older, but in a 62, 100% must be 62 or older, all residents. So we filed the petition. You've seen similar ones before. I've processed similar ones as well. We would think that in this case, it's a pretty matter of fact that the waiver would apply. The waiver is a function of Section 19085 of the Land Use Code, which provides in part that if new development consists of, and among others, elderly housing which can reasonably be expected not to require additional educational facilities, then the waiver would lie and would be appropriate to be granted. So given the nature of the community, the 62 and older requirements, the nature of the construction itself, and the way the rule works, we would respectfully submit that a waiver would lie, and we'd ask that the board give a favorable recommendation to the Board of Aldermen. We appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks. Anyone from the board have any questions for Attorney Westgate? No? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so a reminder for the board, we're just in a referral function here, so we just generally provide a recommendation, either positive or negative, potentially with comments to the Board of Aldermen who actually make the decision regarding the actual approval of this. So, any comments from the board? Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for staff. I think this is the second such referral we've received in the last year or so, and I think the previous one, there was some discussion about some legislative action being taken to sort of make this a blanket clause possibility rather than having each individual applicant come back. I mean, I'm certainly not suggesting we undertake that tonight. I understand what's before us this evening, but is staff aware of any such committee within the Board of Aldermen that has taken this up on sort of a greater level?
No. The Board of Aldermen or a committee thereof has not yet taken up the issue. We are in the process of crafting the legislation that would be submitted to the Board of Aldermen. But yes, there is the intention to make this a blanket, so that you do not have to apply every time.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments by the board? Mr. Barley?
Just to say that I agree with Attorney Westgate in terms of the applicability of the exception here, the waiver, and I would also note that I think it's consistent with, the discussion we had when we approved the plan as well. So I certainly would be in favor of giving a favorable recommendation here.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Someone want to make a motion regarding the recommendation? Ms. Harper?
Yes, Mr. Chair. In regards to the proposed petition for waiver of school impact fees for 2-21 Sutton Way, I propose to give a favorable recommendation to the Board of Aldermen.
All right, so we have that motion for a favorable recommendation to the Board of Aldermen for this item. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bollinger. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, that motion passes. Okay, thank you. All right, so back to the agenda. Next up, old business conditional special use permits, there are none. Old business subdivision plans, there are none. Old business site plans, there are none. New business, case number 823-0052. This is a new business conditional special use permit regarding Rise Above New Hampshire LLC owner. Proposed conditional use permit to allow a woman's halfway house with offices. This property is located at 49 Kinsley Street. So for the board, has anybody had a chance to take a look at this application and want to make a motion as to whether it's ready for us to take jurisdiction?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Bollinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept jurisdiction over a new business, project 823-0052, property located at 49 Kinsley Street.
All right, so we have that motion by Mr. Bollinger to take jurisdiction of 823-0052. Do we have a second? Second by Alderman Clee. Any further discussion on the jurisdiction by the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. We have jurisdiction. All right, Mr. Maynard?
For the record, my name is Richard Maynard, professional engineer with Maynard & Parkhead of Nashua. The project of concern is located at the corner of Kinsley Street and Ash Street. The building is the former community center for the Police Athletic League. It has been empty for several years. The project is located in and is a permitted conditional use in the RC multifamily zone. The proposal is for a halfway house that houses up to 15 residents for 28 days. There are staff members that will be on site throughout the entire day. 4 staff members during what's called the first shift, and 2 each of the 2 nighttime shifts. So there's a total of 8 staff members. No changes to the site are proposed. The residents are not allowed to have cars, and no on-site parking is possible. Parking waiver has been requested for 14 spaces. We've also gone to the ZBA because this use is within a quarter mile of the Spring Street School, just barely. And the Spring Street School was with us for a few more years anyway until they converted. But anyway, the ZBA unanimously granted our conditional use for this site. With that, I will introduce Andy Erickson, who's one of the proponents of Rise Up. He'll just explain roughly what they're going to do with the site.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, my name is Andy Erickson, 28 Quincy Street in Nashua. Basically, we're planning to make it a 28-day residential program. I know all the construction aspects, and then I'll have Michelle tell you the exact outline of what we're going to do. But basically, we're remodeling the whole building, fire safety, sprinkler systems. The building's been gutted down to basically studs at this point. We're putting, after the last meeting, we had a couple neighbors that had concerns, so I talked to both of them. The one to the right, he's good with it now. Now we explained everything, showed him our infrastructure, all our other buildings and properties and how we run everything. So he's okay. And then the other neighbor across the street was concerned about where people would go outside to smoke. So we're putting in a fence from the corner of the building out. Basically, they'll have a fenced-in area where they can go. I've talked to the engineering department next to the dump there, and they said that'll be perfectly fine. So other than that, I'll let Michelle explain exactly what the plan for the building is.
Okay, thanks.
I'm Michelle Clark. I run Process Recovery Center in Nashua and Rise Above Sober Living. So the plan is to have a 28-day, it's a residential program. It'll be for women. It'll house up to 15 women. Like the engineer had said, we'll have a clinician on site, we'll have a case manager on site, and then we'll have 2 behavioral health techs during the day. The second shift and the third shift will each have 2 behavioral health techs on at all times. What they will do from there is they will go to that program and then transition on to PHP or IOP. So they will still be in the community, but they won't be at 49 Kinsley. There'll be a nurse that comes in and sees them during the day. So they'll have clinical services, they'll have case management services, and they'll have nursing services.
Okay. Questions for the applicant by the board? Ms. Harper?
I'm sorry, so just to clarify, this would be the initial step in someone's rehabilitation?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions by the board?
The only step they may do before us is like respite or detox, because we're not going to have a detox or like the social aspect of social detoxing like the respite in Nashua. So they may do that first.
Thank you.
Other questions by the board for the applicant while we're in the hearing? Mr. Riley?
I guess just to follow up on that, then, would you have any status licensure from the Department of Health and Human Services, or are you outside the scope of?
No, we will have to get licensed through the state. So once, like, we went to the zoning board, we're here at this board with you guys, and then depending on what happens here, then we'll have to go for the licensure with the state. We do already run a partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient in Nashua. Those are not licensed, but we are JACO accredited for both of those. So we will have the JACO accreditation for this and also a state licensure.
And, sorry, just a brief follow-up. So at this location, there wouldn't be any, medication-assisted treatment, for example. They would, residents would have to, there would be other facilities that they would go to. So it would be sort of, you would have the on-site care that you were describing, but it wouldn't be the equivalent of like the, a detox or other facility where there would be treatment provided, or would there?
No,
be
they
that
will
option?
have they will have a medical assisted treatment. So if they
Okay.
come in on if they come in on MAT, we'll continue that. We're not gonna stop that. So they will have a nurse that comes in. We'll have a nurse practitioner she won't be on site every day, but she will go in and out of there.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions for the applicant by the board? All right, at this point, I'll go ahead and open up to the public. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak in opposition or concern, have a question of the plan? Come on up. Reminder, speak clearly in the mic and state your name and address for the record.
Vicky Bazoyadis. I live across the street, 85 and a half. I see a lot of things in that street. That building, it never have peaceful things. If this guy, they gotta do something by the law, I'm happy to help the woman. But there's a people over there, they park in the streets and they don't care. They say, you come here to trouble? I said, you don't have sticker for the city, you can park here overnight. For winter times, we have a problem in that street. And I'm here to complain about that, okay? The street they need space for that particular building. They need something people that can go out. I don't know, I don't think it's a good idea. And I don't believe they're gonna stay all the time for 21 days inside. So I'll be here to complain about that. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else in the audience wishing to speak in opposition or concern to the plan? Anybody in the audience wishing to speak in, I guess I'll go to Zoom. Is there anybody on Zoom?
I have Nikki Libby, but
No.
they're not raising their hand or
Okay.
anything. So.
Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the plan? Okay. I'll give the board one more opportunity to speak. Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question, I guess, for the applicants in reference to the last speaker about the parking. So I don't know if this would be Mr.
Yeah, I'll
Maynard
have him come back
or
up. Yeah.
so on. I know it was mentioned there was going to be no on-site parking, but that you were going to be looking for, I think you said like 14 spaces. Is that for staff? Because those there won't have.
The only people bringing vehicles to the site are the 2 or 4 on-site counselors or overseers, whatever you want to call them, plus an occasional visitor. None of the inhabitants are allowed to bring vehicles, so there's more than adequate on-site, on-street parking in the area. There's no parking. There's no place available for parking on the site itself. So,
Yeah.
so technically we need a waiver, but there'll be very little traffic and very few cars, a couple a day at best. So, and then there's more than adequate on-street parking for that potential.
And just to clarify, because I think that she mentioned something about overnight parking, I was assuming that
Speak up.
that these folks would not be parking overnight, or, because I think there was a reference to maybe
Well,
some.
if it's allowed, fine, but otherwise they'll have to park someplace else and walk to the site.
Okay.
So it's
You know,
it's just following the regular parking.
Yeah, we're gonna
Right.
follow the regular parking requirements. There's no special parking being approved here.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you. The city does have a no overnight parking ordinance that goes from midnight until 6 a.m. And that means that other than a 2-hour window, that means that no persons can park in particular streets. And I'm not sure if Kinsley is one that has waivers. So that's something you're going to have to look at for those
Yes, but.
people that are part of
yeah.
that third shift. That could be an issue, just for them. I don't want them getting a ticket every day.
I hear you.
so-
It's city parking down the street, they can be dropped off, they can take a taxi. There's no reason why they have to be trying to park on the street from midnight to 8 a.m. or whatever that third shift is.
Yeah, it's from The
So-
no overnight parking is from midnight
Right.
until 6 a.m. with a 2-hour window, so in other words, you can park.
I
from-
hear you, I
yeah.
understand.
I just, the only reason if I may.
Yep.
The only reason I'm saying that is more for the applicant than yourselves, just so that they know that those people that are gonna be working that shift, just to kind of give them a heads up. I'm not saying that.
The applicant understands all of this. This is not their first project.
I understand that.
We do also own.
Hang on
You
a
gotta go
minute.
to the microphone,
Yeah.
and you have to identify
We do
yourself.
also own a property at 87 Chestnut Street, which is like a block and a half from there, which has a giant parking lot. So we've already discussed that with people that we would be hiring and that may work there, that they may have to walk the block and a half.
Thank you, I'm just glad we got that up for the public, thank you.
Okay. All right, did you have any other rebuttal before I go to,
Excuse me?
any other rebuttal from the?
No, everything else is fine.
Okay.
You know, this is a very needed project in our city. You know, halfway houses for women that don't exist right now, and we need to get these people back into society and this is what this organization does, and that's what we're trying to do with this particular site. And I just want to reemphasize, this is not their first site. They have experience, they have plenty of experience, and they have plenty of expertise to make this work. And they're looking to do more down the road, so they want to make sure this works right. Thank you.
Any other questions by the board while we're in the hearing? Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing, move into the meeting. So, so I welcome any comments, questions. Seems like a pretty worthy use of the facility, and I know there's some parking discussions. Seems like that could be worked through. We pretty much have those same discussions with any property that's in that area, frankly, so. Alderman Clee?
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I agree. I think the city does need more programs like this, and I applaud anybody who's doing these types of programs. As you know, as an alderman, I get a lot of calls about parking and so on, which hits a nerve with me. So I just like to make sure that it's all out in the public. They obviously have a plan, which I think is phenomenal. So I think this is a good project. I think that this is just the first step in their planning and so on. So thank you.
Any other comments by the board? I just had one quick with staff. This is outside the downtown district, so that like the parking waiver is actually necessary?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
not within
A
1,000.
few blocks up, like you wouldn't even need the waiver, right? So,
Yeah, probably.
Correct.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that's what I was thinking. All right, any other comments? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Bollinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve new business, Project 823-0052, property located at 49 Kinsley Street, finding that it does meet the requirements outlined in Site Plan NRO, Section 190-146D, subject to two conditions. The first is with respect to a waiver of Section 190-198 regarding parking spaces shall read is granted and will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation. Stipulation 2, as written in the staff report.
Okay, so we have that motion to approve with the two stipulations as stated by Mr. Bollinger. Do we have a second? Second by Alderman Clee. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks. All right, so moving down the agenda here, just for the public's sake here, there's several cases here that are not being heard tonight, so I'm just going to read off quickly. Case number 823-0062, that's the EC New Hampshire Real Estate Holdings, Inc. That's postponed at this point until August 3rd. New business subdivision plan, 822-0254, Bale Ridge LLC owner. That is also been tabled to August 3rd of 2023. Case number 823-066, I'm going to say 067, 0068, and 069. which were all concerning the Blaylock Holdings site. Those are all have been tabled till September 7th, so those won't be heard tonight. Case number A23-055, Crescent Properties Realty Trust. This is the 495 Amherst Street property that's also postponed to August 3rd. So the next up on the agenda, which actually is the last one on the agenda tonight for us in terms of cases, is case number A23-0075. And this is a site plan from Nash Family Investment Properties and Stella's Family Investment Properties LLC owners, Property Possible Inc. applicant. This is a proposed site plan to redevelop an existing lot into 3, 5, and 6-story residential apartment buildings totaling 362 units, along with associated site improvements. This property is located at 103 Temple Street. So, with regard to this application for the board, has anybody had a chance to take a look at this application and want to make a motion as to whether it's ready for us to take jurisdiction? Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept jurisdiction over new business, case 823-0075, property located at 103 Temple Street.
Okay, so we have a motion to take jurisdiction of A23-0075 by Mr. Bollinger. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Harper. Any further discussion by the board on the jurisdiction? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? That motion passes, so we have jurisdiction. All right, you want to go ahead and present?
Sure. Well, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Tom Zajac. I'm a civil engineer with Hayner Swanson, 3 Congress Street here in Nashua. Here tonight representing Property Possible, the applicant for this project. With me here tonight is Michael LaFavor from Property Possible, as well as Scott Thornton from Van Ness and Associates, the project's traffic consultant. Attorney Jeff Zoll is supposed to be here as well, and so he'll likely be joining us before I finish my presentation. We're here tonight seeking site plan approval to redevelop the subject site, 103 Temple Street, into 3, 5, and 6-story multifamily residential buildings totaling 362 units, along with associated site improvements. I have a brief project presentation, after which myself and the rest of the team would be happy to answer any questions from the board or the public. I'll get started while Scott's bringing that up. Just the aerial photo, if you can get it, Scott.
Elevation. I think this is it. There you go.
Do you have the aerial photo of the site?
I have too many on. There we go. There we go. Let's get you a full screen. So we can-
That's okay. I can talk from that. I had an aerial photo of just the existing site, but I'm sure you're all familiar with it. So 103 Temple Street, map 37, lot 6. It's about 5.8 acres, located in the general industrial and TOD overlay districts. Direct abutters, we've got,
Oh, I got you.
there we go.
There we go.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Scott.
Yeah, no problem.
Temple Street, retail uses and railroad property to our north. Spruce Street and residential uses to our west. We've got Scripture Street, Worcester Street, and residential uses to our east. To the south, we've got Howard Street, St. Mary's Bank, there's a Wendy's, fire station, and city-owned land. So Predominantly residential, but there are some mixed uses throughout this area of the city, as this board is well aware. Existing site is currently developed, so there's a large building complex totaling about 118,000 square feet, mostly one, but there is a portion of the building that is 3 stories directly adjacent to Scripture Street. Historically, the site was the location of the J.F. McElwain Shoe Manufacturing Company dating back to the 1920s. Scott, as always, did a fantastic job in outlining some of the historical aspects of the project, including a link to a pretty cool video from 1923 showing the operations back in the 20s. Current uses on site, there's a mix. We've got a contractor's yard, a kitchen store, a tire repair, sales, church, a shelter, along with the bingo hall. We've got about 2,000 feet of frontage and a total of 8 different curb cuts that go out to the various roads abutting this site. There's also various loading docks and parking areas, some of those directly out into the roadways, and then of course there's a large parking field in the southerly portion of the property adjacent to the bingo hall. Overall, the site is generally flat, really mild topography throughout. Existing site is serviced by sewer, water, gas, drainage, and overhead electrical and telecommunications utilities. Next slide, Scott. Thank you. So it's proposed to demolish the existing buildings in site and then construct the 3 new multifamily buildings, again totaling 362 units. Careful consideration was taken in terms of the layout of the new buildings and parking. One of the goals of the TOD overlay is to create kind of an urban streetscape by placing the buildings up along the main roads with the surface parking kind of either tucked internally to the site or to the rear of the site, with the hope that the buildings are more aesthetically pleasing up along that streetscape. We also wanted to focus here on providing a little bit more of a landscape buffer along Scripture Street, between our new parking lot and Scripture Street. If you've been down Scripture Street, it's a pretty narrow alleyway, and it backs directly up against the back of that 3-story section of that old industrial building. So just a little bit about the buildings themselves. So Building A is top left of your plan at the corner of Temple and Spruce. It's a 6-story building totaling 200 units with 92 parking spaces at the ground floor garage level. Building B, moving south from there, located along Spruce Street, 6-story building totaling 90 units, again, 40 garage parking spaces on that ground floor level. Lastly, Building C, which is located in the lower right of the plan, located adjacent to Howard and Worcester Streets, is a 5-story building totaling 90 units with 36 parking spaces. In terms of unit count, there are 134 1-bedroom units, as well as 228 2-bedroom units. It's about a 1/3, 2/3 mix. And of course, the project will comply with the city's inclusionary housing ordinance, which requires a minimum of 20% of the units to be affordable, which in this case equates to 72 units. Scott, do you mind bringing up the elevations, please?
Sure, next one.
Yep. Thank you. So a little bit about the building design. Again, 5- and 6-story buildings. It's a podium building with ground floor parking and either 5 or 6 stories of residential units above that. The building height is about 72 feet for buildings A and B and 62 feet for building C. This is building height being a building code definition, which is average grade to average roof line. I say that because the roofs of these units will be pitched. For exterior materials, we've got a mix of fieldstone and brick veneer, as well as clapboard siding. We do have some aluminum storefronts and building entries at the ground floor level, again, to kind of break up that facade. And we don't have any lower level retail uses, but wanted to introduce a little bit of that ground floor element to the streetscape and to the view shed from the adjacent roads. In terms of parking, we've got 464 spaces. That's 168 garage level spaces within the 3 buildings, as well as 296 surface parking spaces. In total, we're providing 1.28 spaces per unit provided. As you know, the TOD overlay allows for a minimum of 1 space per unit. And we will have dedicated EV parking spaces at each of the building. That's not shown on the plan currently, but wanted to read that into the record. Access to the site will be provided via 4 curb cuts. Scott, if you could go back to the, yep, thank you. 1 onto Temple Street to the north, 1 onto Spruce Street to the west, and 2 onto Howard Street to the south, again consolidating 8 existing curb cuts into 4. Additional driveway connection is proposed to the corner of Worcester Street and Scripture Street to the east, but that is to be gated and used for emergency access purposes only. Additional site improvements include curbing, sidewalks, signage, landscaping, site lighting, utility services, and stormwater management. So speaking of stormwater, the existing site is fully developed. It's got about 78% impervious cover without any formal treatment practices on site. This portion of the city is all combined sewer. There's no separated drainage and sanitary sewer. So the drainage from this site just dumps right into that combined system. So for that reason and many others, this project really provides a significant opportunity to improve stormwater both from a quality and quantity perspective. The proposed redevelopment project is about the same amount of impervious surface compared to the existing condition. So runoff from the new building and parking areas will be captured via curbing, catch basins, and roof drains and piped into one of 3 subsurface infiltration systems that will be located underneath the parking lot on site. Systems will take advantage of favorable soil conditions, so we've got generally sandy soils and deep depths to groundwater. So the systems are sized to fully store and infiltrate up to including a 100-year storm event. So to boil that down, because we don't have really a viable outlet, we can't really be contributing major flows into the combined sewer system, even though the site does that now. We essentially over-design these systems to be able to fully handle the largest storm event that we designed for. So as a result, certainly a significant improvement to stormwater compared to the existing condition. Traffic memo was prepared by the project's traffic consultant, Van Ness. Scott Thornton from Van Ness is here tonight to answer any questions. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of his study, and certainly if there's any questions, he can answer those. The study was based on a scoping meeting and ongoing communications with the city engineer and city traffic engineer. As always, we thank them for their efforts and coordination. As part of the effort, a comprehensive field inventory was conducted, collect existing roadway geometrics, traffic volumes, speed and sight distance characteristics, land use information, all the typical stuff that goes into a traffic study. The study also incorporates a number of other development projects in this area of the city that have either been proposed, permitted, or under construction. Some of those that I'll highlight, the Temple Street asphalt plant was included, as well as the Henry Hangar development, which is 88 units. The phase 2 of the Residence at Riverfront project, which is about 100 units, and the permitted units at 158 Temple Street, I believe that's about 150 units. So again, all those projects in this area of the city are baked in as a baseline to our study, which is standard practice. As part of that scoping meeting, we also agreed upon a trip distribution, which is key for this site, showing how the vehicles enter and exit. And in this case, it shows a fairly even distribution of traffic east, south, and west from this site going in various directions. Compared to the existing site, the project is expected to result in a net increase of 105 weekday morning trips and 81 weekday evening trips. That includes both entering and exiting vehicles. So the 2 conclusions that were reached as part of the traffic study: 1, the project-related traffic increases will not result in significant increases on the overall volumes or delays within the study area. And 2, the project-related traffic can be adequately accommodated within the existing infrastructure with minimal impact on traffic operations. One other exciting element that I wanted to highlight was the location of this project We're directly adjacent to the Riverwalk, the Easterly Riverwalk terminus to our north, as well as the Heritage Rail Trail East to our south. These amenities will provide direct pedestrian connection for the future residents from the site to the downtown area. As many of you may know, there is a project that's currently on the DOT 10-year plan called the Spruce Street Connector Project. I was completely unaware of it until staff kindly brought that to our attention in one of our pre-application meetings. The project contemplates reconstructing the curb and sidewalk along the easterly side of Spruce Street, so our side of Spruce Street. It's about 800 feet, in order to create a new 10-foot wide multi-use path and to kind of enhance that connection between those key amenities. So we immediately began exploring how we could potentially assist in making that connector a reality. Fast forward to now, we do have an agreement in principle with staff that much of the construction for the Spruce Street connector will be completed as part of our project, including resetting curb line and widening the grass shoulder. Many engineering details certainly to work out with both planning and engineering staff. But these improvements will be completed in lieu of the typically requested traffic contribution, and will enhance that vital connection, as I talked about, for future residents of this project, but also the walking public. Mr. Chair, we did have one waiver request for this project, waiver letter dated June 30th, 2023, related to providing existing conditions plans on abutting properties. The justification for this request is outlined in my letter, and I ask that be incorporated into the record, and of course I'll answer any questions pertaining to that. The second kind of housekeeping item is because we are in the TOD overlay and tied in to the mixed-use overlay, we do have to provide a site plan suitability report, which we did as part of this application. So that letter also is dated June 30th, 2023. Our testimony here tonight is we believe this project meets all 7 criteria as outlined in the land use code. We address each of those 7 criteria in detail in the letter. Again, I ask that be incorporated into the record by reference. But just to summarize, so our opinion is that this project is certainly well aligned with the goals and the objectives of not only the 2021 master plan, but also the 2020 housing study, the 2017 Riverfront master plan, as well as the 2004 East Hollis Street area plan. If you look at each of those documents, you certainly can find pieces that speak directly to the type of project that we're proposing here tonight. Again, that's outlined in detail in that letter, and I'd be happy to address any questions or comments related to that piece. So in summary, we believe our application is complete and conforms with the site plan requirements, the goals and objectives of the city master plan, as well as the TOD overlay district. Certainly this project will provide much needed downtown housing, as outlined in the housing study, with a mix of both market rate and affordable units, as we will comply with the city's inclusionary housing ordinance. Lastly, this project will help the city attain some of their downtown walkability and pedestrian connectivity goals by helping link the Riverwalk with the rail trail via the Spruce Street connector. So, Mr. Chair, the conditions outlined in the staff report are acceptable. And again, I'd like to thank staff for their assistance as we move through this project, and be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Sure. Okay. I'll open up to the board. Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Bollinger?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm not sure if Mr. Zajac would like to address this, or maybe it's a question for Mr. Hudson, but staff stipulation number 4 calls out a dollar amount of $37,000 to be used for improvements, basically, but if they've already committed to the Spruce Street improvement work, does that nullify that dollar contribution, or is that in addition to?
Well, yeah, let me take it. Sure. Okay, Mr. Chair. I worked with Sam to draft this condition. Based upon the traffic numbers, the contribution was $37,000. As Mr. Zajac referenced, there's a little bit of additional coordination to do relative to exactly what will be constructed, but I think the applicant is leaning in that direction. So I think it's appropriate to have a condition that leaves both options open should we come to some impasse and we can't make that work for some reason. But I think it is the intent that, rather than the contribution, that we would actually do the physical construction of that to support the future multi-use path through there.
Okay, but I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Engineering department and the applicant are comfortable with the language as presented this evening? Is that a true statement?
Yes, I am.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Mr. Chair, if I,
Sure,
one
yeah,
additional
go ahead.
follow-up. This may be covered under condition number 6, discussion about all easements submitted to city staff, but with respect to any easement or reservation of right-of-way regarding the Spruce Street path, multi-use path, is that sort of encumbered in the language of condition number 6, or does that call for an additional stipulation? Either one of you.
So I'll jump in on this one. My understanding, again, we're still a little bit early in the process.
Okay.
Wanted to set the amount of the contribution essentially, and then have a discussion about, we're not going to build the entire connector. One of the key parts is going to be moving that curb, narrowing the lane, as well as building the path. We'll likely only build a 5-foot wide path where the city may come along, or DOT may come along later and build the wider path along the entire 800 feet. My understanding is the project will occur solely within the right-of-way, and no easements or right-of-way dedication would be needed for this project.
Okay, so even for maintenance of the swath along your site frontage, that's all within the public right-of-way as proposed?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Dodson.
Yeah, I think that's correct. It's pretty ample right-of-way out there, so I think we can accomplish it all within the right-of-way. There was, and maybe it's right or wrong, but there was some reference to an easement over on Howard Street, and then there's a sewer main that runs through the property. So there's some other easements unrelated to the Spruce Street connector that may need to get worked out. But again, we'll resolve those things in the final revisions of the plans.
Okay, very good. Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Other questions? Alderman Clee?
Thank you. And this, again, may fall within a stipulation number 3. The report that came from Mr. Mandola and Mr. Husbands talked a lot about, let me make sure I get the terms proper, some of the site views and so on. Is that going to be, and perhaps this is to Mr. Hudson, would that be addressed in item number 3? When I was talking about, let me see if I can find them, I think they called it ISDs and SSDs, the site distance, that they'd like to have 200 feet, and sometimes they're only like 120 feet. Would that be in item number 3?
So, Mr. Chair, yes, I think those would be encompassed in number 3 in addressing our comments. However, the traffic engineer is here tonight, so if we want to have him speak to those at this time, we can do that. But yes, those are among the issues to be resolved in the engineering's final review and approval of the plans.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you. That's just with the amount of potential traffic, those peak hours, I really would like to make sure those are addressed. So, thank you.
Other questions for the board? Ms. Harper?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I just had a couple of questions about the construction. During construction, is that the entrance to Scripture going to remain locked?
I don't think it's stated explicitly on the plan, but given the narrowness of those
Yeah.
streets, I don't envision any trucks would want to go down there. If we wanted to add a note or a condition related to that, we'd be amenable to that.
Okay, thank you. And then also, we had a case recently where we heard that a lot of children walk that direction to get to school. Are there any additional safety measures for, having incoming trucks and what have you coming onto the site that could happen?
Yeah, so great question. We're a urban infill redevelopment project, so on sight lines and other things, we're somewhat limited poles in the roadway. Certainly from our perspective, if you've been out there's sections of sidewalk. We got 2,000 feet of frontage on all 4 sides of us. there's sections of sidewalk that are in good shape and other sections that are in not so good shape. So first and foremost, we're really rebuilding all the curb and sidewalk along our frontage, which is going to help improve things. We'll have, tip-down ramps and crosswalks and signage and stop bars, and so that will help clean up or alleviate any existing issues out there. We're also going to have only 4 curb cuts for mostly residential traffic. As I mentioned, there's 8 curb cuts out there now. Some of those directly lead to loading docks with kind of blind views, so that'll help. And then lastly, the vehicles that'll be using the site are generally going to be, passenger vehicles. They'll be Amazon delivery trucks or box trucks, U-Haul trucks for moving, but you're not going to have tractor-trailer trucks that are trying to navigate in and around this site. So for all those reasons, I think we're, improving the existing situation and certainly mitigating any truck traffic that we would have on our site.
Oh, no, I totally agree with that. I was thinking more so during the construction phase where you may
okay.
be having larger
Sure.
vehicles coming and going.
Okay, yeah, understood. So yeah, we would try to focus our construction traffic, towards Spruce Street, Temple Street areas where we've got clear lines of sight. And, as you saw with, let's say something like the Bronstein redevelopment project where really the whole site is being wiped out. You get construction fencing and signage out on that roadway at the back of sidewalk to really keep folks out.
Thank you. And just one other quick operational question, just about snow removal. Are there designated areas for snow, or how do they plan on handling that?
We've got some areas, but not too many. So what's typical for a site like this is if if there's a smaller snow event, you'll be able to store stuff on site. Larger storm events, they'll have to remove snow off site in a legal manner.
Thank you.
I just had a question about the Temple Street crosswalk. Is the intent that that's kind of existing to remain as is? Was there any discussions about, I'm thinking as you get to, because it kind of heads you to the Riverwalk, right? Was there any discussions with the city about, having lights or anything there at some point? Is that a future thing that's part of the Riverwalk? Anybody know the answer to that? Mr. Hudson, yep.
Yeah, so we do have a project in the 10-year plan for Spruce Street Connector, and the concept for that plan involved creating a 10-foot multi-use path along Spruce Street. But then that crossing with Temple Street, we do anticipate to have some safety features such as rectangular rapid flashing beacons, or maybe it rises to the level of, a hawk system where you press it and you get the red light. So it is envisioned that that'll be improved and made a safer crossing as the demand increases there because of the additional residences, but also as that path gets built out and the riverfront project gets built out and becomes a higher demand.
Okay, so the future crosswalk concept is compatible with this layout? Yeah.
So we're going to try to, as part of that coordination, we're rebuilding all the curb and sidewalk anyway. So we'll do our best to line up and tee that up in terms of the crosswalk location, ramps. The Spruce Street connector itself is, I think, a $1.5 million project. So we certainly won't be able to implement everything that was involved in that. But we'll get it started, and then the final improvements that are part of that would likely be installed at a later date.
Okay. Other questions by the board, the applicant? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. At this point, then I will go ahead and open up to the public. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak in opposition, concern, or have a question on the plan? Come on up, state your name and address for record, and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Lucy Sprague. I own 13 and 13.5 Spruce Street, which is directly in front of St. Mary's. It wasn't discussed, but I take it St. Mary's is the only business that is staying.
We'll ask the question for you. Yep. So,
Okay.
yep.
This is the first time I'm seeing the drawing. On Spruce Street, I don't know how many of you have actually walked Spruce Street. The residents on Spruce Street are one-family and two-family homes. This is out of character to this block of the neighborhood to put 6 families in here, six stories high. Another thing, please, everybody that's here, please take your time and walk along the Nashua River rail track and see if you feel safe. Because I did that this morning. So please take your time and walk it from Main Street up to Armory Street. Okay? And while you're at it, walk the Heritage Rail Trail other side of Harbor Street that's supposed to be put in, connecting up to the Heritage Rail Trail here at City Hall going the other direction. Walk it. Because there's nothing like seeing things in person. So the height, 6 stories, again, is out of character to this side of Hollis Street. On the other side of the church on Temple Street is a building that was built several years back. It's only 3 stories high. That's, in this neighborhood, it's only, the max is 3 stories high. So we need to keep the character of this particular side of Hollis Street. The other thing, yes, I do want the builder to put in more than $37,000 in this neighborhood. There's not a playground in this neighborhood.
Make sure you stay on the mic. If you don't
Something with a basketball court. You have all of these residents coming in. There is no playground. This is going to bring tremendous traffic to Spruce Street. I would suggest that the buildings actually be on Scripture side, and the trees be on Spruce Street side, not vice versa, because it's the other side that doesn't look so good. Again, you gotta take your time and walk this block to see what's on Scripture Street. That's where the buildings should be, and the trees need to be on Spruce Street. That's a beautiful street. That's very wide. That's wider than your normal street, Spruce. We need to maintain that character. It's beautiful. So we need to improve, not bring it down. So I want trees planted on Spruce Street side, please, because right now on that block, there are 11 full-grown trees. It's one thing to sit here. It's another thing to actually take the time and walk this neighborhood and to live on it. My taxes just went up $2,000 this year. I just went to DPW and made them go clean the Riverwalk. My neighbor down the street, their taxes went up $3,000. We are the taxpayers. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else in the audience wish to speak in opposition or concern or have a question of the plan? Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the plan? Hearing not, I will open back up to the applicant as a rebuttal to any of the public testimony here. There was a couple of specific questions. The bank, is there any thoughts of playgrounds or that kind of stuff?
Sure.
Yep.
I'm just going to have Scott Thornton address the
Yep.
site distance question first, and then I'll come back up.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, good evening. For the record, Scott Thornton with Vanessa and Associates. Your question regarding the site distance is well-founded. We've got, so of the various driveways that we have, the 4 driveways that we have for the site, we have, in general, the three of them have no issues with sight distance. There was one comment about 137 feet. That's really the existing sight distance, and it's being obstructed by the existing building, the tire warehouse site. So once that building's removed, there should be sight distance greater than 300 feet in each direction at that location. That's the Temple Street driveway. The other location is the driveway that's the eastern one on Howard Street. And the issue with that is that Howard Street curves at that, about 170 feet or so away from the driveway. Now, the vehicles coming around that curve should really be going only about 15 miles an hour. In that case, they would need about 80 feet of sight distance. So what we have is between 163 and 177, I believe, which is more than adequate for a car to come to a stop at that location. We don't think that there's, I think there's 15 or 20 parking spaces there, so that's not going to be a lot of activity coming out of that driveway. So we don't, and on Howard Street in particular, there's not much. In fact, in most of the streets, there's not much traffic on a peak hour basis. So we don't feel there's going to be an issue there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
So just addressing some of the comments I've made in terms of out of character or the mass scale of the buildings. Certainly recognize that these buildings are larger than some of the adjacent properties. When you take a step back and look at this general area, it's an area that is in transition. There are a number of large mid-rise buildings that have popped up in this area, are proposed or under construction or occupied. We are in the GI TOD, but just across Spruce Street is the RC zone, which allows 10-story buildings by right. So we're kind of keeping within that balance of this area. We are doing our best to provide parking and this development in an efficient manner. We're coming up out of the ground with garage level parking, again, to meet that parking demand. And so I would say for those reasons, we're certainly in character with the general neighborhood, as well as with the goals and objectives of the master plan and the East Hollis Street Gateway Plan, as well as the intent of the TOD, which is allows and promotes kind of that vertical build for sites. In terms of the safety of the Riverwalk and rail trail, I've walked that area myself plenty of times. I would say that those projects are not yet completed. They're either planned or about to break ground in terms of the Heritage Rail Trail East connection, as well as the riverfront piece. So hopefully with those completed improvements, as well as an influx of more people using those paths, the hope there is that those will feel more safe. We don't currently have a playground or rec space. We've got some amenities inside of the building. Certainly there's no provisions here for a public park. Any rec or playground space would be, on site. Again, I talked about the pedestrian amenity of having access to these major railway corridors to use some of these, urban playgrounds and urban walkable areas of the site. And then in terms of the plantings along Spruce Street, so the plan that's before you on the screen does show a number of new street trees. Again, we're trying to create that street tree aesthetic where the buildings are up front, close to the road, but you do have, a 10 to 20 foot green strip between the sidewalk and the face of the building. With this Spruce Street connector, that green strip and that green area is actually only going to be widened further out towards the road. So I know there was some discussion about plantings being proposed, but we are planting a number of trees along that area on Spruce Street. Thank you.
Just the bank is staying, right? So-
The bank is staying, the bank is on its own property there. The Spruce Street connector improvements would really need to go across their property, but again, within the right of way, so that the bank is staying, that's a separate property.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so for the board, any further questions of the applicant or staff while we are in the hearing? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing now and move into the meeting. Okay. So just a few comments from myself. Certainly a reasonable size development with regard to the purpose of the project, you know, with the inclusionary zoning taken in place. It certainly feels very consistent with the master plan of the city that I was involved with. So I feel like that box is checked pretty well by this project. It does foster the Spruce Street connector work and the connections to the Riverwalk, which again are all kind of future and partially underway, but I think the ability to coordinate this with that, without this development, those projects probably are not as successful. So I think this helps to move that further down the road. So that's a couple of my comments. I welcome anybody else's for discussion here within the board. Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with everything that you said. I also agree that the city needs as much housing as possible. I will say that I always have reservations when I hear tall buildings going up, and when I look that the homes across the street are residential homes, as was put by the speaker, they're going to now be looking at a very tall building. That's what they're going to see from their front door. I'm not saying that that's a reason to say no to this, because the city is ever-changing, and that area does need as much as possible. But I do think that this is some type of going to be a culture shock for these people that do live there. I always look at things as, you know, does it affect their property values in a negative way? I would like to say no. I don't really know that, but it is a concern that I do have as to the residents that are living there, that have been living there. These are older homes that have been there for quite a long time. So I just want to get that out there. It is a concern that I do have, but thank you.
Mr. Varley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess just to speak to that sort of fit with the neighborhood point briefly, I mean, I would say I recognize that, you know, maybe if you look at it strictly from a height perspective relative to, you know, the immediate surrounding residences, it is, you know, there is, you know, quite a bit of a difference. But I think if you look at it, sort of zoom out a little bit and look at it from the perspective of the sort of the larger neighborhood, you know, there are two other, you know, apartment projects that, you know, have been approved, although I don't know what status they're in, you know, sort of along East Hollow Street, the corridor there, that are both, I think, at least five or 6 stories tall. And then you've got another of other apartment complexes that are sort of in the immediate vicinity that maybe aren't quite as tall, but are certainly sort of within the same, you know, range in terms of the Marshall Street apartments, and then there's a smaller set of apartments that are actually quite close to this site. So, you know, I recognize that it's, you know, that the size of the buildings is going to be meaningfully different than what is on the site now, but I would say when you zoom out and look at it from the larger neighborhood, it's not, you know, it's not as you know, different or out of, you know, out of a relationship to you know, the larger neighborhood. And, you know, then I would just add to that, I mean, I do think that the applicant is making some pretty substantial improvements to the site, you know, that go, you know, beyond, you know, the buildings themselves. So I think, if you look at it, sort of balancing some of the pluses and minuses, I would say from the neighborhood perspective, I would see this as more of a plus overall, even if the size of the buildings are going to be, different than what they're used to. So, I guess that's the way I look at it from the sort of the balance of the interest perspective.
Thank you.
Other comments on the board? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion. Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion to approve new business, case A23-0075, site plan, property located at 103 Temple Street, finding, sorry, Mr. Chair, slow computer this evening, but finding that it does meet the requirements outlined in Site Plan NRO, Section 190-146D, subject to 13 conditions. The first of which is regarding a waiver of Section 190-279EE with respect to existing conditions plan, and shall read is granted and will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulation, and stipulations 2 through 13 as written in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bollinger. So we have that motion to approve with the 13 stipulations as stated by Mr. Bollinger. And do we have a second for it? Second by Mr. Varley. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? That motion passes. Okay. Thank you very much. All right, so the only thing we have left on our agenda here is a review of our tentative agenda. So for those on the board, has anybody had a chance to take a look at the tentative agenda?
So just,
there is one?
admitting that I'm getting used to the new system here, I don't see a link in the agenda for,
Yeah, we
so I don't know if that
might
means
miss
there
that
isn't
one.
one.
That is correct.
Okay.
There was one thing I missed, and it was that.
All right. That's all right.
But
Hit
just
that
to
next.
summarize, there are no potential DRI applications coming down the pipe in terms of our tentative agenda.
Okay, so we'll punt that to the next meeting at this point,
Yep.
Understanding that we don't have any actions we need to take right away. And then I will just open up any discussion items by anybody here. Alderman Clee?
Thank you. I do love the new agenda and how things are going, but I have to tell you, I did have to have some things printed out, and I should have had more printed out. I cannot open a lot of these files on my iPad. They start to open up, and then it says that this link is not acceptable and so on. I did make a copy of it just to let you know. So I do have issues with the iPad. I could end up bringing my laptop here, but then I'm going to have plugging in issues. So
It's likely a size issue with the files,
Yeah.
particularly with the Temple Street one. Anytime you have a large project over an area, you have match lines,
Right.
The
that's
file
why
set
I
becomes
jumped
large.
onto Zoom so I could
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
the items. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they all seem to work, because I've been flicking through them as
Yeah,
a
but
meeting.
with the iPad, I just can't do
Maybe
it.
with that, yeah.
The
Okay.
city iPad one.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll keep working on that. Any other discussion, Ms. Harper?
Oh, just, if we could have power on this side too, that would be really fantastic.
We'll get another one.
There you go.
Thank you.
I think we can make that happen.
Anything else? Mr. Bollinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe just a quick question for staff. We've had 2 cases bumped to August 3rd tonight. Do you have a rough idea of how the agenda was shaping up without those tablings?
Without those, or
I guess, well,
it's, we
how
had.
long is August 3rd going to be? Is that a midnight night, or?
It's going to be sizable. So it was the 310 Daniel Webster Highway. That was the casino. We have another 175 East Hall Street. That's a 95-unit project. This will be the first time you're seeing that. That was already scheduled for that agenda. So that is now being accompanied by these applications that were continued. I believe other than that, we have one small 2-lot subdivision. And yes, and Camp Doucette as well, which was continued, and the 495 Amherst Street project. So it is a sizable agenda, though I have faith that this board can muscle through it with expeditiously.
It wasn't a complaint, it's just, it's tough during the summer months where there's only one July.
I agree.
And one, so that was it, so, no offense was meant towards that question, so, thank you.
Understood, thank you.
I'll apologize in advance for not being here on August Day.
Okay, any other discussion items? Mr.
I
Hudson?
just wanted to echo that I really do like the new format with the agenda. I thought it was great. I'm having problems with just one of the files tonight, but the other ones were working, so.
Which file was that?
It was the elevations.
Yep. that
It
was
tries
the
to
one I had.
open, it opens and then it crashes. You
Yeah.
see it and then it crashes, so.
Yeah,
That was the
they're
same one I had,
definitely
yeah.
working.
I was able
Yeah,
to
I
get
wasn't
both of them, they were fairly large files, I think they
They
were
are.
25 meg, but,
Yeah.
And they'll open up on a computer. I
The
had no
Surface,
problems
yeah,
at
it's no
home on the
problem.
computer, but I couldn't get it on my.
Yeah.
Yeah, we may just need to work with IT to figure out better ways to
Yeah,
optimize these
Maybe do
PDFs.
a reduced PDF size or
We-
something. yeah.
We did.
You did,
We
okay.
need to, we need to reduce further, so there may be some tricks that I'm not aware of that we'll start
It
using.
starts to open, you get that first
Yeah.
screen, and
Yeah.
then you get that
Yeah,
crash.
that's the only
message.
file. And the other thing is, I don't know if it's required, but when we reference meeting minutes from other meetings or historical meetings, is it required to put the full set of the meeting minutes in there? Because I ended up, in this packet, I ended up browsing through, pages and pages and pages of stuff that was for other projects unrelated, because it was in the subject meeting, say at a zoning board meeting or something like that. I think the top of every meeting minute has the meeting, what the board is and the date, so I'm wondering if we can just take excerpts from those meeting minutes for the portions that are applicable, not provide the full.
This was a link you clicked on the agenda?
Well, one of it was for a different project, just didn't get heard tonight, and it was
Oh.
submitted by the
By-
applicant.
yes.
So
No,
that,
I
I know
believe
you
that was
can't do,
by-
any-
by a
I can't
member
do
of
anything
the
about that
public.
one. But I think, somewhere, I think there was some references to some zoning board minutes.
There-
That we might have
yes.
put the whole minutes packet in.
Yes.
And a lot of it wasn't applicable to the subject, so that'd be the other minor revision, but I appreciate what staff has done with the agenda. I think
Yeah.
it's quite a nice format.
Thank you.
It was easy to read and get to.
Well, it's
Yeah.
easy to use during the meeting too, frankly.
Yeah, definitely.
It'll save us a lot of paper and a lot of staff time printing and organizing all these pages.
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
it may not be necessary, but since we all have access to everything electronically now, do we need to let presenters know that we're listening, but we're trying to look along as well? I just don't want people to think we're ignoring them, just because we're not necessarily looking at them, but if we're trying to read the plan set, and I'm not trying to make a big etiquette thing out of it, but I've been to other meetings where they've made basically they want to let you know that, yes, we're listening, we're not tuning you out.
Right.
Not necessary, but,
Not watching cat videos.
yeah, not this time. but,
I was using my phone tonight, so I did feel like that at
Yeah.
some point, because I was scrolling through my phone, but I was looking at the
I
think so. I
faces.
think they'll get used to it.
I was doing the same thing between my phone and trying to say, okay, can't get it there, gonna get it here. Yeah.
All right, if there's no other, we'll go ahead and take a motion to adjourn. Ms. Harper?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
All right, so we have that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. We're adjourned at 8, looks like 19 of the